So welcome back to another episode of Voices in Health and Wellness. Today's guest has built a medical career that challenges some of the conventional ideas about what success in private medicine is supposed to look like. Dr. Mark Rosenberg is a board-certified emergency medicine physician who has led an emergency department at Walter Reed, spent decades involved with the American Academy of Anti-Aging Medicine, and developed expertise across longevity medicine, integrative oncology, and medical innovation. What's particularly interesting about Mark's story is that he hasn't pursued the conventional model of building the biggest practice possible. He's deliberately kept his clinical work relatively low volume, giving himself the ability to spend more time with patients while pursuing research, innovation, and other ventures alongside medicine. So today we're going to explore that journey, the choices behind it, the challenges that come with it, and what Mark has learned about building a medical career around impact rather than simply scale. So Mark, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
So Mark, you've had a career that's gone in several directions that I imagine you probably couldn't have predicted from the outset. So if we go right back, how would you describe your journey that's taken you from emergency medicine to the work that you're currently doing today?
So it's interesting. I think you and I share the same specialty initially anyway. And I think many emergency physicians, we become, jack of all trades, master of none. We know something about everything. And I think many emergency physicians, after a while, start looking in other directions. And so while I was very happy doing academic emergency medicine and teaching residents, when I moved to Florida in the States in 1996, I heard about an academy called the American Academy of Anti-Aging Medicine. And to be honest, at the time, it was there was no science to it. It was all really, opinions is what it was, but not science. And but I was intrigued, and I became an advisor to them and helped bring in well-renowned speakers, doctors from all over, and I got hooked because one of the issues that we always hear in the United States, we don't do healthcare, we do sick care. So we are really good at handling crises. But when you look at the mean lifespan in the United States, it's very clear that we don't do healthcare. We don't promote wellness. Right now, the mean lifespan in the United States is around 77 years. In Cuba, they live 3 years longer than we do. I have had conversations with the RFK assistants, and they are aware that we are the sickest, wealthiest nation in the world. So I really got intrigued by saying, hey, can we improve healthcare? Can we decrease the incidence of illness and age-related disease? So that's why I went that way. And then, not fortuitous, that's for sure, I was still working some shifts in the emergency department in 2004, and my mom walked in. My mom usually would call me, but she walked in, and I said, what's going on? She said, I just rushed over here because I'm having this strange chest pain. And so I started with, of course, a PA and lateral chest x-ray, and I see a large lung mass, and that leads to CT chest, abdomen, pelvis. And she's got mets to liver, spleen, bilateral adrenal glands, and left hip. And I said to myself, oh my God. So I dug into the literature, and I brought my mom to Philadelphia. I went to University of Pennsylvania undergrad, and they said, look, Mark, you're a doctor. So here's the deal. If you do chemotherapy, she may live 6 months. If you don't do anything, she may live 4 months, maybe 6 months. And I was blown away that that's what we've got. And of course, this is before the time where we developed some targeted drugs, like specifically against an ALK mutation or EGFR. But I was, of course, dismayed. And so I said, I had done research in undergrad, and I was actually thinking about just being a PhD instead of an MD or an MD PhD. And so I said, I'm going to start digging into the literature, and I ended up starting a pharmaceutical company and brought a drug to Harvard to target cancer stem cells. Most recently, I got awarded a patent for developing an extracorporeal filter that eliminates circulating tumor clusters. So this is a direction I didn't want to go in. I had no interest and never knew I was going in that direction. But life takes us to places that we don't know we're going.
For sure, and thank you for sharing that. It's really, really helpful context, hearing about your start and move in different directions. But let's look at what, the starting point was emergency medicine, and you were running an emergency department at Walter Reed. What did that part of your career teach you about medicine and leadership at that point of your career?
So, as far as leadership, it's actually both Army, because the Army put me through med school. So it's the leadership with Army as well as, running the emergency department. And, of course, that's where I learned a lot about leadership, because the whole team, and when I say the whole team, it's not just the other doctors and the nurses, it's the medics, and of course, other departments at Walter Reed would come to me because we had to actually set up MASH tents for deployment. And so it taught me a lot about leadership, and everybody leads differently. And I think there's an innate part. I will be completely transparent. You don't want me being the CEO of a big company. And I say that because, although I like to think I use my brain a lot, I use my heart a lot also. And nobody would ever call me a tough leader, because I'm not. And every once in a while, I had to do things that hurt me to let somebody go. But I think it really shaped the leader that I became. And again, I think as I've matured, I'm 66 years old now. I think rather than becoming harder and tougher of a leader, I'm more forgiving, more loving. And I actually, while some people may not like the way I lead, I like it. And that's what I will continue to do.
Thank you. So you obviously talked about your mother's diagnosis a few moments ago, and I'm guessing that was the point at which it changed the direction of your career. But you were in emergency medicine, and then we've suddenly gone into oncology. So what was the moment when you decided that oncology was your new direction in your career? Was it that diagnosis, and how did it kind of shape up after that point?
It was exactly that. I mean, so after that diagnosis was made, and this is before AI, of course, this is 2004, I spent hours. I mean, I think I probably slept a couple hours a night, and I spent, 3 weeks just exhausting the literature. And then I presented my mom with about 400 pages of options. But I started becoming fascinated. I mean, cancer is, just obviously a devastating disease. And to this day, I tell my patients this, we haven't come that far. Let's go back 1,000 years ago. If they saw cancer, they would cut it out. And if they cut it out before it spread, then you won the game, they're free. But of course, most of the time we don't know if it spread, and certainly they didn't have the technology back then. So if it spread, then they eventually succumbed to the disease. Fast forward to 2026. If it has spread, the best we can do is utilize some of our modalities and drugs to try to buy some more time, but they're still going to succumb to the disease. And I was aware of that when I did my research in 2004. And I started studying originally what's called the Warburg effect, which is the glycolytic nature of cancer. And I was fascinated. It's like, cancer is terrible, but it's also, it's fascinating. It's fascinating. And it's like, who's the genius who's going to figure this out? So it just sucked me in. As a matter of fact, I had a sort of, he became a mentor. He was a board certified hematologist, oncologist, and we used to lecture together. And I ended up becoming the the program director for the first and only integrative cancer fellowship in the country. And he would lecture with me, and he said, Mark, and he was 20 years older than me. He said, I just want to warn you, this will suck you in. It's like a rabbit hole, and you're going to constantly research and think you've got something, and it'll just suck you in, and you won't be able to get out. And he was right. You can't rest until you figure this out. And, this is not a question you asked, but do I think we'll ever have a cure for cancer? And the answer is no, I don't. I think that our best hope is to be able to manage it, hopefully indefinitely, so individuals die of a different disease. But we're certainly not there yet.
Thank you. So one of the things I found particularly interesting when we first spoke was your approach to private practice. There's often this assumption that success means more patients, hiring more people, opening more locations, and continually increasing revenue. But you've consciously done something a little bit different. And it's very interesting to know why you deliberately chose not to build a high volume medical practice like everybody tells us that we probably should do.
Sure. I think it's because I have other areas of interest. Initially I said, I've got a lot of things going on, so I'm not going to see 30 patients a day. And let me back up a little bit. At least certainly in the States, which doctors make the most money? Which are the most profitable from a business standpoint? Well, it's doctors that do procedures, like surgeons. And then you don't have to be a surgeon, but you can do procedures, and that's where you make your money. And if you are not doing procedures, let's say you're a standard internal medicine doctor, well, you have to make your money on volume. And when we say volume, I mean, I'm talking 25 to 30 patients, in a 7-hour working day, figure you get an hour off for lunch. And I realized that I can't do good medicine that way. I sit with every patient for an hour. And so I told myself, I'm either going to practice medicine the way I think it needs to be practiced, or I'm not going to practice anymore. And certainly I have, a lot of patients who have been with me for, over 20 years. And so I don't make, I make an okay living for my practice, but it's subsidized by my other projects. And I don't regret that at all. Now, in the States, there's a way to do what I'm doing and really make good money, like you were doing procedures. And that's the concept of concierge medicine. And so concierge medicine, at least in this country, the doctors say, look, I'm only going to take so many patients. Maybe I'll cap it at 50 or 75 patients. That's all. But I'm going to charge a yearly fee. In addition to the charges that you'll get when you see me in my practice, there's going to be an upfront yearly fee, anywhere from $5,000 to $10,000 to, I found out there are some doctors in Palm Beach charging $100,000 a year. Now, you do the math, you get 50 patients, that can make it work. So I think, now, what have I done? I feel that there are a lot of patients that need me and they don't have a lot of money. So sometimes I charge a concierge fee and sometimes I waive it. Sometimes I cut it in half because, again, I'm not for sustaining, financially sustaining myself. I'm not relying solely on the income from the practice.
Got it. So obviously your prime driver is being allowed to have the time to spend with patients, which is so important. But are there any other advantages to keeping the practice of that size, and anything that it allows you to do clinically by having that sort of model?
Yeah, I think a big advantage is I think there's less mistakes. I mean, for example, in the emergency department, when you get slammed and you're juggling, I remember those days juggling 10 to 12 patients at a time. The human brain, or at least my human brain, can only do so much, and you can start making mistakes. When I get, I'm sure I make mistakes that I'm not aware of, but I think they're really very few, because I spend an hour with each patient, and I go over everything with a fine tooth comb. So I really like the way the way I'm practicing.
For sure. So obviously, having a model with that size, you've mentioned a number of advantages. And apart from the income from the practice, are there any other disadvantages or trade-offs that come with keeping the practice that small?
Well, as far as the disadvantages, I think number one, and I don't know, it's not a disadvantage to me, but you're keeping it small. There's a lot of people who want or need to see you, and they can't. But if I were to say, are there any other disadvantages? The way I'm practicing, it's if I truly want to maximize my income, what I would do is everybody gets charged a concierge fee, and instead of putting my limit at 50 or 75 patients, you bring in someone else like a nurse practitioner or PA, and now you go up to 100, 125. So there are ways to do what I'm doing and make it more profitable. I'm a little bit of a control freak, so I'd want to look over the PA or nurse practitioners. I'd end up redoing everything. But yeah, I mean, I have to say, with what I'm doing, do I perceive personally any disadvantages? No, I'm happy doing what I'm doing.
Amazing. And are there any challenges around your own time? Because I guess everything comes back to you. If you're the sole driver of this and all of your patients are your own, does that not have a sort of consequence on you and your time?
It certainly does. There's no question about it. It's not great for families, hence I'm getting divorced. Yeah, it's like your time. And to be honest, the more I give, the more patients expect. So way too many of my patients have my cell phone, and they'll just have a thought. They'll be in a store, they want to buy a supplement, and they're like, I'll just text Dr. Rosenberg. What do you think about this supplement? What do you think about? So that is a disadvantage, is that you do have to set boundaries. And I'm going to be completely honest, I'm not good at setting boundaries.
Fair. So what does your working week look like at the moment? You do lots of different things. How does it all factor in?
So what I do, what's interesting is only about 20% of my income comes from my practice, yet that's where 95% of my time goes. So, I get up, 5:45 in the morning and take care of the dogs and take care of the kids. And I'm in the office by 7 in the morning preparing for the day. And then, I start seeing my first patient either 8:30 or 9. And throughout the day, labs are coming in, emails. And so what I do, though, is I work nonstop. I don't eat. And so, I start work at 7 in the morning, and I typically will finish with patients around 3 o'clock. But it's nonstop from 7 a.m. to 3. And I do make time for lots of coffee, of course, but that doesn't interfere with seeing patients. And then I have to do paperwork. And so I'm pretty much done with the office by 4:30. Then I come home and deal with everything in the house and the kids. But as you can imagine, the emails keep coming, the calls keep coming. So it's kind of scattered throughout the night. Now, in addition, I have to find the time. I'm also, I said I'm I'm a KOL for the American Academy of Anti-Aging Medicine, and I have to Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays, I have to create content. I have to do things. In addition, for example, next Thursday, I'm presenting I'm trying to raise 1.5 million for a dog study. We're going to take dogs with hemangiosarcoma, which is one of the most aggressive cancers. The median survival once they're diagnosed is typically 2 to 3 months. So we hopefully can show by eliminating their tumor clusters that we can significantly extend health span and lifespan. So I spend time on that. And next Thursday, we're presenting to another entity to hopefully make some money. Get some money for the dog study. In addition, I like to write, and on Saturdays and Sundays. So I don't know if I shared this with you, but I wrote a book called Curing Death, a science fiction novel. Did I tell you that? So although it's science fiction, it's somewhat autobiographical. So when I say that, so Mark Rosenberg, Mike Royce is an emergency physician who works in a trauma center. And he's kind of cocky. He's very muscular, good looking, and he's in his 30s and very quick thinking. And he's the man. But as you know, in a trauma center, you lose a lot of people. A lot of people die. And so he looks at the eyes in people that die, and he feels sad, and he's like, I have to figure this out, because he's lost. And by the way, in the book, there are all these emergency medicine cases, and they're all true. They're all my cases. Of course, the names have been changed, but some of them are horrific. Some of them will make you cry. Some will make you laugh, and it's all true. So what he does is he asks the hospital. He said, "I want to do a study on terminally ill patients," and he gets permission from the administration to do physician-assisted suicide. And so what he says, he gets a team together, and they're going to bring people into the hospital in a ward. They're going to stay for a month before they actually push the lethal cocktail. And he's going to study them. He's going to do frequent CT scans, PET scans, MRIs, lots of labs. And his goal is to find a commonality on everybody who's soon to die. And if he can find that commonality, can he intervene and stop death? So what he ends up finding is he's like the day before and the day of that he's going to push the lethal cocktail. He does he's doing a PET scan. He's looking, and he notices that 60 minutes, it's always 60 minutes before they're scheduled to have the lethal cocktail, there's an area in the temporal parietal occipital region that lights up every time. And then 5 minutes later, it's gone. And then, of course, they push, and it's always 60 minutes it shows up, and then it's gone in 5 minutes. And he said, what is that? Why is that area lighting up always 60 minutes before we push the lethal cocktail? And he said, it's an energy. I don't know if it's the soul. I don't know what it is. And so what he ends up doing is playing with magnets. Of course, we are all electromagnetic beings. And he puts them like an MRI magnet, but the MRI goes to 3 Tesla. And he turns on the magnet and nothing happens. That hotspot leaves. And he turns it higher and higher. And he gets an engineer. He turns it up to 45 Tesla. And all of a sudden, that hotspot that starts to go, it starts shuddering and it stops dead. And he's holding it there as long as the magnet's on. And he pushes the lethal cocktail and they don't die. So everybody that has the magnet on, that holds that energy, it doesn't matter what you push, they don't die. So that was an amazing discovery. And that's all I want to tell you, because it gets crazy from there. So there's a lot of science in there and all my thoughts, really. And right now, of course, it's science fiction. Who knows if it'll always be science fiction, but it's a wild, wild ride. And I had an amazing time writing it. And interestingly, I relived many of these horrific experiences, watching people die. And it was an interesting time writing this.
Fascinating. What was the inspiration for writing the book? Was it just this lifelong career of all the things that you'd seen that you wanted to kind of document and write as cases? What was the inspiration for putting that down and putting the science fiction element into it?
I think the inspiration was, when I was a child, I mean, I was interested in aging. You may remember the first life extension book that came out by Dirk Pearson and Sandy Shaw in the 70s, I think. And I read it, as a teenager. And I've always been fascinated with death and why do we die and what happens when we die and can we stop it? And I think it was kind of the coming together of um, all my horrific cases in emergency medicine and sadness, combined with my my interest, to figure this out. And I will tell you, I when I was a kid, like I wrote short stories, and I realized I have or I think I have a gift to write science fiction short stories. So I'm like, I had never written anything before, and I just did it, and it's my baby. It was fun. It was a lot of fun.
Thank you. So you do lots of things. You've obviously got your clinical practice, your cancer work, longevity medicine, your A4 involvement, executive responsibilities. What are the biggest time drains in the things that you do at the moment?
There's no question. The biggest time drains are my patients. That is, yeah, I mean, that occupies most of my time. I apologize. After that, I would say what I do is I try to spend 3 to 4 hours at the end of every night reading the literature, searching the literature. And it's much easier now. I have to take that back. Now it's probably 2 hours. AI has been a great help. And, but I spend at least a couple of hours every night uh, trying to stay on top of everything. I tell patients I want to be the AI myself. There's really no need to now because it's right. It's it's available, but that takes a lot of my time. And then, there's another project that I was asked to be chief medical officer for a new telehealth longevity platform, and I have to write all the protocols. So, yeah, I mean, honestly, I mean, I could make a career out of each one of my projects.
So if I gave you a magic wand and we could free up that time drain, what would your kind of working week look like? How would it be different?
So I will tell you that I would like to work less in the office seeing patients. Um, and so if you waved a magic wand, you would find someone that is my clone or similar or has a similar fund of knowledge and say, take it over. And every once in a while, will bring me in to, consult. But that would be a huge lift uh, of my burden if you can create a clone for me.
Thank you. When we booked our original conversation, I did ask you what your biggest operational challenge was in your practice. What is that? Because I don't think we ever got to it, or perhaps you've already covered it already.
The biggest operational challenge is, and again, it's about me setting boundaries. People, the patients expect so much from me, and they often don't. So I charge cash for each visit, and what they'll often do is they'll bypass the receptionist and just call me, and basically try to get a phone consult, and bypassing the visit. So that has been a big challenge, and it's, I'm the one who set the tone, but I've spoken with my staff, and I said, every time you speak to a patient, let them know, don't call my cell phone unless it's an emergency. Everything has to come through them. And so, but that's been my biggest operational challenge, and it's because of my own fault.
Thank you, and thank you for your honesty. So that brings us to another fascinating part of your career. So I know you've been involved not only in treating cancer, but also trying to develop entirely new approaches to it. You previously worked on cancer stem cell drug that reached animal studies, but didn't quite get to progress to clinical trials. So what did that experience teach you about the difference between a promising medical idea and actually getting that idea into the hands of patients?
Yeah, so that's what any if you're a cancer researcher, cancer scientist, unless you're working for big pharma, uh, university, you're really aware of there are. I think we all know there are many promising modalities, medicines, supplements that really repurpose drugs that potentially could make a difference in cancer treatment. And when I say make a difference, again, I'm not talking about a cure, but I'm talking about improving quality of life and potentially quantity of life. But if there's no valuable intellectual property on it, so these substances will simply not be studied, and that's very disappointing. Now, in addition, there are drugs where there is IP on it, but it's obviously there's so much bureaucracy in many governments and certainly the United States, and it's very expensive. So what I did is I brought a drug to Harvard because we have no drug to target cancer stem cells, and we actually met with a group out of Harvard that started a company called Nanoproteogen, and they make novel nanoparticles. So they took the drug that I brought to them, and they put it in a nanoparticle, and that nanoparticle, because of the leakiness or enhanced permeability of the vascular wall in the cancer cells specifically, my drug would go right there. So we did mouse studies. We did ovarian cancer, prostate cancer, pancreatic cancer, non-small cell lung cancer, triple negative breast cancer. We did all the tough cancers, and the results were remarkable. So then the next step is raising money, presenting this data. I'm raising money for a human trial. And that did not go well. And the company basically got run into the ground financially and gone. It's gone. Now, there's a new CEO who's a good friend of mine. He's very busy, but, potentially we can resurrect this. But, I'm sure you're aware that most new drugs that are developed will never see the light of day. A very small percentage. But, I know that there are many modalities and substances out there that could help. As a matter of fact, so I was speaking with the assistants to RFK, and the discussion I had with them is that the government needs to step up when big pharma can't benefit from it, even if the substance is very interesting. Who's going to fund the study? And I said that's where the government needs to step up. And I gave them a very simple example. We've been using maximum tolerated dose chemotherapy forever. And it's based on faulty preclinical data. I have a whole PowerPoint on this. But every oncologist knows you need to use the highest amount so that the patient can stand, so you kill most tumor cells. The problem with that is you also kill the immune system. And you, as you really kill a lot of cancer cells, you very quickly cause natural selection, and you select out for the most resistant cells, and you lose the game. And so what I did is I pulled data. There's some very interesting publications where they looked at low dose chemotherapy, high dose chemotherapy, and then medium dose. And they found in this publication that medium dose was the most effective. Low dose kept the immune system intact, but it didn't kill enough tumor cells. High dose did a great job killing tumor cells, but it killed the immune system. And medium dose seemed to do the best of both. And so I spoke to the assistant to RFK, and I said, we have all these small trials using medium dose with good results. But what any oncologist would say is, until there is a large randomized clinical trial using medium dose against high dose, there's no way we're going to change. And of course, my answer is, and that will never happen. unless the government steps up. I don't know that that's going to happen.
Wow. Okay. And I know you've got a thing that you're working on at the moment with the Canine study. You're presenting at a meeting shortly. What's the next step after that to get that project moving forward?
So, if we get, we need 1.5 million. And, that's small money when you're talking about raising money for a big pharma. But here's the exciting thing for our listeners out there who may be interested. So remember I said with hemangiosarcoma that the dogs that we're going to be studying, so we're not hurting these dogs. We're trying to help dying dogs. And because the median survival is about 2 to 3 months from diagnosis, if we, at 6 months, all the dogs are alive and thriving, we actually immediately have a veterinary modality, because the FDA, the US FDA, does not get involved in veterinary medicine. And so we can immediately start getting revenue by selling this to veterinary oncologists around the country. And that could help fund a human trial. And so it's a big business for both. People around the world love their pets and will do anything for their dying pets. And so it's a big business for both veterinary medicine and oncology. And that 1.5 million really could, that could launch us. Right now we're valuing our company arbitrarily at $3 million. But if during the dog study at 6 months, the dogs are all alive and thriving, we've just doubled the survival. And immediately, when we apply for a human trial, we will publish that. And the valuation of the company, I don't know, 500 million, a billion, because this would be, nobody's developed anything for hemangiosarcoma to extend survival. And if we can at least double survival and quality of life, that's a home run.
Fascinating. But Mark, you're 66 now. You've described yourself as someone who genuinely walks the talk when it comes to longevity. I guess you're not retiring anytime soon. So what's next for you? What are your plans for the future professionally?
Well, I think for the future, here's what I want to do. I want to continue research. I want to write nonfiction and fiction. And I see myself becoming a public figure, not politically, but a public figure in science and medicine and wellness. So I see myself, on stage. I see myself on podcasts like this. And I think that's my future. I don't know if you tell me if you want me to go down that road. I tell you I just recently wrote a book that I am discussing with literary agents, and it's called A Doctor's Conversation with God. Did I tell you that?
No, please do expand.
Okay. All right. So I started life as a teenager as an atheist. Like many scientists, I was an atheist. And I actually talked to my parents and said, no offense, mom and dad, you're not educated and you believe in God, and that's great. But science doesn't support that. And it's really for uneducated people. Eventually, with everything that I've seen, I became an agnostic. And then with everything I've seen, everything I've read, most of the books on near-death experiences. I've read many of the books on, you may be familiar with children between the ages of 2 and 5 that have complete recall of a prior lifetime. And so I've read all this, and then I've relooked at the complexity of this universe. It's so perfect. If our moon was tilted, less than 1 degree one way, life would not exist. It's so incredibly perfect. And while I've been going through this very traumatic divorce, which had a great effect on me, and I got deep into depression, I got on AI and I asked it some questions. I said, would you agree that every organism is composed of DNA, RNA, or the combination? And it said yes. And I said, would you agree that that is a unique code or program to every organism? And it said yes. And then I said, can you name one program that does not have a programmer? And of course it said, I see where you're going. And that's why even a lot of quantum physicists are now saying there is an organizing force, not only an organizing force that set it up, but is maintaining. And so what I said in this book is faith did not bring me to the belief in God, science did. And so what I started doing is talking to, and by the way, I needed, are you familiar with a 3-book series written by Neil Donald Walsh in the 90s called Conversations with God? Are you familiar with that?
I'm not, no, I'm not.
So it was a 3-book series, and it was about a man who is life was tough. You know, I think he was losing his job. He's getting divorced. Life was just a bummer. And he started talking to God and getting answers and wrote it down. And it was on the New York Times bestseller list for 2.5 years. It's been translated into almost every language. It's all over the place. So I started talking, and I say right in the preface in my book, I don't know if I'm talking to Mark, a higher version of Mark, or God. All I know is I'm getting wise answers. And I started asking all these questions like, God, if you're here, when did you get here? How did you get here? If you're this benevolent God, how do you let 5-year-old children die of leukemia? How do you let terrible people like Hitler kill 6 million people? Is there a soul? If there's a soul, what happens when I ask all these questions? And I asked personally, and I said, God, what's the answer to cancer? And I got all these answers, and I sent this to many of my patients, and it's made a great impact on their life. And again, I don't know if this is just, a higher version of Mark answering, but the answers are profound, and it's helped shape my life. And one of the things I've learned is that our purpose for being here is to give and to love. That's why we're here, to give and to love. And my own conversation has helped me become the person I want to become. And I hope a doctor's conversation with God gets out there. And I see myself, I'm the science guy, but I see myself talking about this because, I absolutely believe that there is a collective consciousness, and the universe is conscious, the entire universe. So anyway, I know that's completely different than everything else I've done.
No, but fascinating. There's such a breadth to your career and your interests. Thank you. So look, you've got decades of experience across emergency medicine, longevity, oncology, leadership, research, entrepreneurship. If you were starting over again tomorrow, would you do anything differently with everything that you now know?
I think, I didn't know the direction medicine was going to be heading in, and I thought about this, I would have gone right into research from the beginning, because that really fires me up. That really intrigues me. But I am also aware that, like if I got hired by a pharmaceutical company, I'm following orders, right? They'll give me a certain amount of leeway. But honestly, I think I would have just gone right to, research, just get a PhD, and instead of doing clinical medicine.
And with that, Mark, I'd love to thank you so much for joining us today. It's been a really fascinating conversation. You've shared so honestly about your entire career and the various things that have shaped it. I think what's particularly interesting about your story is that you've never really followed the conventional definition of growth. You've deliberately kept your clinical practice relatively small while creating room for oncology and longevity medicine and research and innovation and other ventures. And perhaps that's the bigger lesson here. Growth doesn't necessarily mean more patients, more employees, more locations. Sometimes it's just about creating enough freedom to spend your time solving the problems you believe are worth solving. And so with that, I'd love to thank you so much for joining us and for such a enriching conversation.
Oh, thank you, Andrew. I appreciate you having me.